life in jail? And how the hell do protesters end up in jail longer than the cops they're protesting? We'll talk about these questions today on Georgia Fort Live. Is the pandemic ending? Will Derek Chauvin spend the rest of his life in jail? And how the hell do protesters end up in jail longer than the cops they're protesting? We'll talk about these questions today on Georgia Fort Live. I'm independent journalist Georgia Fort. We will have a special guest joining us. But first, you guys, today the U.S. Senator announced that there is going to be some major developments in terms of COVID, right? We're seeing that these vaccinations are now being expanded to 12 to 15-year-olds. We're seeing that across many, many states, they are going to be lifting COVID restrictions and ending the mask mandate. I mean, we've even heard former Lady Michelle Obama speak on this. Take a listen.
It does seem like we're coming out of the COVID valley. It was a long, dark tunnel. I think we're still sort of in the tunnel, but I do sort of see light back there.
Yeah, well, it'd be better light if people would get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still have yet to get vaccinated. I'm going to be asking my guest who's joining me now, media mogul and political analysis Benjamin Dixon. Have you gotten your vaccination yet?
Media mogul? No, I am not that. But yes, I've gotten my first vaccine, and I am getting my second vaccine. Maxine Waters. That's what I was going to say. I was going to say Maxine. I'm getting my second vaccine this Friday, so I'm almost free.
So are you did you have any concerns or did you have any symptoms, reactions once you got your vaccination?
No, it was actually pretty straightforward. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel the shot. I didn't feel any chills. Now I hear the second one has a little impact to it. So we'll keep our eye on that. But as far as it goes for me, I was fine all the way around the board.
And what are your thoughts about the politicians, both on a state and federal level, removing these mandates? We've all, been kind of in the house for the last year. When we go out, we're wearing masks. And now on a state level, many of the states are lifting those restrictions. So are you going to feel comfortable after June 15th going outside without a mask?
I don't know. So here's the thing, for me, if I didn't have kids, probably so. I'm going to be honest with you. If I didn't have kids, I would probably be good to go. But, even with the vaccine, you're still able, the odds are a lot lower. I want to be sure, if you get the vaccine, the odds of you transmitting it they're very low, but I'm going to take extra precautions for my kids. So I'm sure I'll still wear a mask and avoid public places until my kids get vaccinated as well.
To be honest, I haven't really talked about COVID a lot just because I feel like there's so many uncertainties. There's so many stigmas in the Black community.
Yeah.
And so many people were reserved about getting the vaccination that I didn't want to be an influence for people either way. Right.
Yeah.
And so I have really reserved any comments on COVID and the vaccine and all of that. But recently my family had a COVID scare and
Oh, no.
I went into this whole spiral as a parent of how do you quarantine with kids? My kids were banging on my door, begging to come in. And I can't imagine, for single parents, even what that would be like if you were exposed and to try to stay away from your kids and balance work. Did your family have any scare throughout the last year of anyone in your house having COVID?
I'm laughing because anybody who watches, and I know our producer in the background is laughing because last week I was quarantining and it was so difficult. And that's with my wife helping out. I absolutely have no idea how someone could, I don't even think it's possible to quarantine as a single parent because my kids were putting two and two together. They were like, "You're in the room too long, Daddy." And whenever I came out, I was wearing masks. They're like, "Why are you wearing masks?" So it was, it is a spiral. I think you called it a spiral. It is definitely a spiral. I'm looking forward to getting out of this.
So, and for me, I had a false positive test. And
Oh,
so
no.
I was like so scared to go to sleep because I was like, if I wake up, am I going to have symptoms? And
Mhm.
so finally, I just knocked out. I woke
Exactly.
up. I was fine. I called one of my friends who does like a lot of holistic remedies and stuff like that. I'm like, what do I need to do?
Right.
And so, I mean, I took turkey tail mushroom supplements, shaga mushroom supplements, liquid iron,
Yeah.
thieves oil,
You were
papaya
on it.
seeds. And
You were
then,
on
like
it.
2 days later, I took another test. And it came back negative. So either I had a false positive or my homeboy has the cure for COVID.
Listen, I tell you this much. After I took the test, I just took the test this past Sunday. I didn't come out of quarantine until Monday when I got the results. And I did not know I could put something that far up my nose. And as a result of that, I don't think I'm going anywhere else. Like, hi, key, I don't ever want to take a COVID test ever again. So I'm good
Yeah,
on
it's
that.
terrible. It's terrible. Well,
Mhm.
switching gears here, in 2 weeks, it will be exactly 1 year since George Floyd was murdered, and Derek Chauvin's sentencing is quickly approaching. We learned more about how the judge is thinking about the sentencing. The judge who oversaw Chauvin's murder trial ruled Wednesday that 4 aggravating factors could result in a longer prison sentence. Now, based on Minnesota law, the maximum sentence is about 40 years since Chauvin didn't have any prior convictions. And they base that on what's called like the Minnesota sentencing grid. So, based on that, he would likely get about 12 years, which is
Mm,
also what we saw for one other officer who was convicted in Minnesota. But the judge is considering these 4 different factors: abuse of power, the presence of children, cruelty, and the fact that it was a group crime. And so
mm.
either we're thinking that Chauvin is going to get about 40 years in jail, or potentially the judge could extend that time even longer.
Yeah.
Uh, Benjamin, what's your take on all of this?
You know, 12 years will be 12 years would be so insulting that I think they would have to be concerned about more protests because that's an injustice. 40 years is about right. Life is about right. I'm not a proponent of the death penalty, and I know that's not a factor in this case, but I am definitely a proponent of this man spending the rest of his life in jail. And I appreciate the factors that they are bringing into it because it was a group crime. It was a group lynching, and the fact that he did it in broad daylight in front of children. I'm glad that that's a factor. All these things, like Chauvin was big and bad when he murdered um, George Floyd, and so he needs to pay the price accordingly.
No, I covered the trial. I was one of just a handful of reporters that was actually allowed into the courtroom. This is a state case, right? But we know that the Department of Justice has now launched this investigation, a federal investigation. They're bringing up other incidents involving Chauvin. And so, are you familiar? Because I don't have a ton of experience in covering like federal cases. Are you familiar with what might result in those federal indictments? Like, could he possibly get even more jail time on like a federal level because of the DOJ investigation?
Well, yeah, definitely. Like they are facing all four of the police officers are facing charges, different charges. For one of the last officer, I can't recall his name, but no, he certainly can get additional time. How they would manage that with the state, I honestly don't know how they would manage the two consecutive or what's it's not consecutive. It would be probably be served at the same time. There's another word for when you serve multiple sentences at the same time. I'm sure that would be how they would do it.
Concurrent?
Concurrent. That's the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
But in terms of exactly how it's going to play out, we just have to see the extent of the charges, right? Because the civil rights charges that he's facing, I don't imagine they're going to carry the amount of weight that the murder conviction is going to carry.
Right. Right. Well, and then so June 15th is the date that is scheduled for sentencing. I just got an email today saying that they are going to let media back in there. And so I believe that we'll be able to carry that court feed of the sentencing, which is interesting because think about this. There was a day where Chauvin was in court and the judge asked, whether he wanted the jury to determine his sentencing or if he wanted the judge to determine his sentencing. And so he, this is the fate that he chose, and we'll find out
Yeah.
June 15th. But the other developments surrounding the Minneapolis Police Department, there was a note that came out today. Up to $35 million is being distributed to former cops who stepped down after George Floyd. Many of them saying that they had been injured on the job, whether physically or mentally, and now some of them getting between $175,000 to $250,000 for stepping down and after enduring these alleged injuries.
I'm trying to be careful because this
Your
is your channel.
silence,
This
your
is your
your silence is loud. It says a lot.
look. Um, these people are just pillaging our communities from our taxpayer dollars, right? These are people who come from outside the community. Generally speaking, police in general. Um, they travel to our neighborhoods, they collect checks from our neighborhoods, and then they go back to their neighborhoods and take that money back with them. And this is probably the grossest example of that, because in their own protests, they were so upset that all these protests were going on behalf of George Floyd. They were so upset with whatever the political leaders were saying at the time that they quit or they resigned or they did whatever they did to no longer serve. And now they're getting rewarded for it. I mean, that's insult to injury. There's a whole lot of ways that I'll describe them at another time, but that's just wild. That's wild how they pimp the system like that.
Zen says they profit maximize our extermination. So, Benjamin, do you think defund is the answer? Do you think abolishing is the answer? What do you think would really change the way policing is happening? A lot of people thought this trial would, but really we haven't seen any substantial change following the trial.
No, that's right. You gotta, honestly, the answer is to abolish the police. The answer for me is to abolish the state, but that's a whole different conversation. I don't know that we'll ever see the police abolished in our lifetime, but I don't think it's unreasonable to demand that they be defunded and that those resources be reallocated to the communities that they have been abusing. That's not radical, right? That's not revolutionary. We're saying take money from them because they take up an obscene amount of every single city budget. The majority expense for every single city is the police. And we see that they are not only the majority expense, but they are an expense on top of that because the city also has to pay all these settlements, right? And so if they take these police, and here's the other thing, I'm sorry, I don't mean you asking all the questions that's going to make me drive my blood pressure up, because think about it. These police officers aren't out here saving lives. They come too late. When they want us to be afraid of someone robbing us. What are you going to do if you get robbed? The same thing we do when we get robbed anyway. We get robbed, and then 30 minutes later, the police will show up. Well, how about the police don't show up and they don't even answer? They don't even solve most of these crimes. So if you're telling me we can free up money to put money into mental health counseling, we could put money into the community, into community centers, we could put money into taking care of the people in that city instead of giving that money to police officers who, generally speaking, always show up too late and very rarely solve these crimes. I'm good on that. Let's defund the police at a bare minimum. That's the compromise.
Are there any politicians that support abolishing the police?
Yeah, you have I'm pretty sure there's a couple of members of the squad. I don't think AOC has come out in favor of of defunding the police. Wait, hang on, let me double back. Did you say abolish the police?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, I don't know of any city politician who's in favor of abolishing. I know a couple of who like to talk about defunding. Yeah.
It's definitely a slippery slope. Even thinking about when Obama came out and kind of touched on it lightly, the only compelling argument that I've really heard for abolishing police was by Angela Davis. The civil rights leader, legendary, respect and love her so much. She was on a local radio station here being interviewed actually by a woman named Angela Davis.
Oh,
and
wow.
She said, when you think back to slavery, right? At that time, during slavery, people thought it was so radical to abolish slavery. And now that sounds absurd, right?
Right.
To not abolish it. But at that time, she was saying that there were actually conversations to reform slavery. Like, oh, we don't have to get rid of it. If we just reform it, if
Yeah.
we just make it better, if we just make it more equitable, if we, you know, and so it was so crazy to hear her say that. It's like, here is a system that was designed to keep people oppressed.
Yeah.
And we, instead of trying to create a new system that's fair for everyone, we're trying to reform it.
Right.
And I think my jaw just hit the floor because number one, I revere her so much, and she's been through it all. But to hear her put it in those terms for me was mind blowing. Have you ever heard that theory or that comparison before?
No, I hadn't. And I'm gonna be honest with you, is I agree with her 100%. I agree. The older I get, the more radical I get. Now, not radical in the sense of, like some of my friends who, fully believe in the ability for us to have an actual revolution. But in theory, I'm so tired of these systems that we are giving our taxpayer dollars to harm us, right? We're paying these people to oppress us. Our tax dollars are going to them to not only oppress us, but to exploit us. And so hearing Angela Davis put it in that context, it just adds a little bit, it adds more to the fact, it has more revolutionary spirit in me, because at the end of the day, it's not only the police that need to be abolished, but a lot of these governments that aren't doing anything on our behalf. They're just taking our money and exploiting us, taking our money and sending it to other nations that are bombing and doing the bombings. And they're taking our dollars to do the worst things across this globe. So not only abolish the police, but some of these states need to be abolished. I'll leave it at that.
Well, and so I've been trying to cover all spectrums.
Yeah.
People who just, feel like there's a couple of bad apples,
Yeah.
people feel like defund, people who feel like abolish. And, what I've realized, regardless of how you look at it, is there is consensus that there's a problem.
Absolutely.
Right. And so regardless of where you are on the spectrum, most people have started to acknowledge that some type of change needs to happen. But here in Minnesota, we're still waiting for any change. And it's almost been a year. And so much so that the issues have started to infiltrate outside of just the police department. I mean, even when you look at what's happening with protesters, right? Think about this. We have a constitutional right to protest, to free press. Yet and still, every time we're seeing large groups of predominantly Black individuals gather and stand up for a cause, we're seeing multiple violations of the First Amendment right? And at the hands of law enforcement or even military. Now, just after Dante Wright was killed, nearly 300 protesters were arrested within that first week after he was fatally shot. I had the chance to sit down with one of those protesters to learn more about why law enforcement said that he was being arrested. He said that he felt it was a clear violation of his rights. Take a listen to what he had to say. Kim Potter, the officer who fatally shot Dante Wright, was bailed out of jail and ultimately spent less time in jail than what you did as a protester. How does that feel to find that out?
And it's kind of demoralizing too. Just like I'm trying to help. I'm going out there protesting, and a woman who committed murder had less time. Just makes me take a step back and say, is this gonna end? Is what we're doing gonna help in the long term? Because especially after I was arrested, it's starting to feel a lot more hopeless than previously. Because especially when you're there in the moment, it's powerful, and it feels like you are making a difference. And it is really important to protest, and I'm not gonna stop protesting by any means. But especially with that fact that she got less jail time, it's just like, is this are we going to see the results of what we're fighting for in our lifetime? And I don't know the answer to that question.
And that goes back to what you just said. Are we going to see these changes in our lifetime? Now, check this out. So this kid, he was arrested Friday night and he didn't get booked until Saturday morning. So he stayed in jail until Monday afternoon. They kept him on a 36-hour hold, probable cause riot, never charged him. The officer who fatally shot Dante Wright on Sunday was arrested Wednesday morning. And a few hours later, she bailed out. She served so far less time, right? And everybody's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
However, people who are being charged with manslaughter or murder serving less time than people who are out protesting these very killings.
And and it could reach so much further, right? Because it's possible that she'll get off. And it's very possible that while she can get off, this gentleman would turn around and might actually serve some real time for these charges that he's facing. And that is demoralizing. I can understand like how he feels, because that's a real thing. Like, this system is so designed to protect the oppressor and to oppress the people who are trying to fight back against this. Solidarity with that brother. And I saw underneath it, I just got to give him a shout out. I saw it underneath his shirt, underneath his jacket. He had that Bernie 2020 shirt on. I just, solidarity with my fellow Bernie bro, Bernie bruh, and keep on fighting,
Absolutely.
And I hope that one thing that I know happened, was it last year? Was it the Minneapolis Fund? I know that there's a lot of money in the Minneapolis Bail Fund that we sent last year after during the George Floyd protests.
Yep.
So if nothing else, I hope that brother didn't have to spend a penny of his own money, because I know we sent enough last year for it to happen, for him to get out or get on bail.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizing to support, even after Dante Wright was killed. Now, if you recall, his initial stop, people said that it was because he had expired tabs. So they've now created an expired tabs fund. So there's always a lot of organizing to really try to support the people who are in this movement and who are really trying to stand up for change. But quick story on how I even connected with that guy. As you saw, I had footage of his arrest. I was out live streaming the night that he was arrested, and I posted a clip to TikTok, and it went viral. It got 1.2 million views overnight. And so I didn't even know, because I'm not really on TikTok. I just kind of post and go. So I get this inbox on Facebook, and it's this girl who is like, "Did you have his permission? You showed his face. That's my friend. How dare you?" And in media, you always walk a fine line between amplifying and exploiting. And so I was there really trying to call attention to how these protesters were being arrested despite having the First Amendment right to be there, right? And so happens we had mutual friends, and sometimes you're like on the verge of being canceled behind doing stuff like that. I'm like, oh Lord,
they coming to get you. They about to come.
They cancel me. But so he got out. We had mutual friends, so we were able to connect, and I was able to really sit down. And he wasn't mad. In fact, I think he was a bit flattered, because he had literally thousands of comments of girls who were like, "Hey, if he gets house arrest, tell the judge he can do it at my house." So like
it's the little things. It's the little things, right? That's great. That's great. But you're so right. Like, in the coverage, like, one of the things I learned in covering these things on the scene is to you try to protect the protesters as much as you can. Because what we've seen is the policing agencies, they go through social media, but then there's the other side of it, is that we need to get the word out as far as we can. And so, had you not done that, then we would not have had that footage, and two, would not have had that story. But three, he also wouldn't have had the thirst trap, or all the people who want him to do the house arrest with them. But I mean, no, serious, on a serious tip though, we have an ecosystem that we're building, and people in media, as well as the protesters, as well as the bail funds, as well as the people who donate to the bail funds, because it's going to take a collective effort, and it is going to require media coverage, and sometimes that coverage may get a little bit on edge in terms of exposing people, but it's a balancing act, and I think you did it well.
Yeah, well, he came out with choices. And a little bit of street cred.
Choices and street cred goes a long way in this game, man. Well, I mean, for young people who are unmarried and all that kind of stuff, it's amazing.
Right. Well, so I know in your neck of the woods, there's been a lot that has been going on, from the weather to even developments. The grand jury has decided to indict Robert Aaron Long on murder charges. Long is a suspect in the Atlanta metro area spa shootings that resulted in 8 people being killed across 3 different locations. Prosecutors will seek the death penalty in the case. And Ben, I know you said you don't agree with that, but this case, killing 8 people, what are your thoughts? So, with an act that was this heinous.
I'm torn. It is very it takes a lot for me personally to have the moral consistency to oppose the death penalty in all cases. The reason I oppose the death penalty in all cases is because in our cases, in the Black community, we've seen too many times, and I always start with the Black community because it's always disproportionate, but there's also some white people who have been executed wrongly and then exonerated after the fact. And to me, that has to be the most terrifying experience, to know that you're on death row and you're going to be executed for something that in your heart you did not do. And then the second reason is
we just saw that happen. We just saw that happen. The brother who was accused of murder, and 4 years after being executed, they finally tested the DNA on the weapon, and it wasn't his.
And it was not his. And so it takes a lot. But I tell you, 2 people who really are pushing the envelope for me, and I question my own moral consistency. Dylan Roof, for killing the 9 people at Mother Emanuel AME, and this guy, because of how heinous the crimes were. So, I'm not going to go out and protest on either one of their behalf. Let the state do what the state does. But I don't think that any state has the moral standing to execute another human being when these states don't deserve to exist in the first place.
I want you guys to take a listen to the district attorney when they made the announcement that they were going to be requesting the death penalty in this case.
I, along with my staff, have made a determination that this office will seek the death penalty. Last year, I told the voters of Fulton County that I could not imagine a circumstance where I would seek it. And at that time, I did not. Unfortunately, a case has arisen in the first few months of my term that I believe warrants the ultimate penalty, and we shall seek it. We have filed a notice that we will seek sentence enhancement pursuant to Georgia's sentencing enhancement statute, commonly referred to as a hate crime statute.
Like, morally, you have blood on your hands. Like, it's murder for murder, right? And for me, I think just the simple morality of just thinking about the death penalty. It's just like you're telling someone you shouldn't murder, and so I'm going to murder you. Like, how it doesn't make sense to me. And I remember when I lived in Georgia, I lived in Columbus, Georgia, about 2 hours south of Atlanta, and being from Minnesota, where we don't have the death penalty, I just wasn't as in tune with how frequently it was still being used. And so being there in the South, especially in Alabama, and, hearing, I couldn't function on days when I knew someone was going to be killed. It's like, wow, okay, today at 6 o'clock, someone's going to be executed. And I just would sit there and I'd see the clock go through the whole day, and it's 5:55. I'm like, this person has 5 more minutes to live. This person has 3 more. Okay, somebody just got killed. I mean,